Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we are gonna be trying to guide all of you guys best I can through 7.12. So I did finish my 7.1 exploration already. It was very fun. I did end up absolutely exploring it without any boosts, revives and items. And these video series basically me trying to explain what I did, why I did what, and suggest decent alternatives to the champions. Yesterday we discussed 7.11. Today we're going to jump in and take a look at 7.12. So I'm going to go through every single path nodes, and then we're going to take a look at the bosses later on. Alright, so the first path here is a Typhoon, Spite, and Power Axis 2. All in all, Spite is always quite annoying node to deal with. However, you have Power Axis 2, which helps you get your level 2s quicker. So quite obviously, you do have quite decent options here, because you can easily go with like Power Control Champions and deal with the fight that way. I also recommend going through, for instance, with Ghost and Hood synergy and just tanking the level 3s and completely ignoring this fight. Because Typhoon effectively does nothing so long as you have high enough damage champion. And Power Axis 2 for most part is more helpful to you than it is to opponent, because it enables you to get to level 2s quicker. Only thing left to worry about is Spite here, and obviously you have your standard Spite counters such as Quake and Red Guardian, for instance. Then you can bring in Magic, or as I mentioned beforehand, you can just tank the level 3s using Ghost and Hood synergy. But overall, any champion that has relatively decent power control shouldn't be too much of an issue in these fights. Now, Hitmonkey might be a bit of a trouble, and that is why Ghost came so in handy right here, because Hitmonkey waits, and once you knock him down, and you typically do power control using special attacks, so you're gonna enable him to go either unblockable or evade and shrug off parry stance, and that can be very annoying fight. So my personal option was to use Gwenpool there. If you cannot, then I definitely suggest somebody that either doesn't buff at all and play very conservatively, trying to bait out level 1s exclusively, or using Ghost as I mentioned before, to counter the way. Then we had Magneto as well along the lines, which I personally ended up quaking. But remember that obviously if you're playing with Ghost, then Ghost is metal and Magneto is going to have quite easy time. Quite easy time dealing with your Ghost. Other than that, we have Sorcerer Supreme, Human Torch, and Vision, which are not much of a problem fights at all. Now, moving on to the next lane, Destructive Feedback, Evolutionary Advantage, which enhances your mutant champions. While the defender is suffering from Bleed, Armor Break, or Concussion debuff, mutant attackers gain an indefinite Fury buff, and then you have Overage Fury. So here, the only thing to worry about is the Destructive Feedback, really. So you can bring in your mutants, but in general, you can pretty much use anyone, because if you play around Destructive Feedback, it's not the biggest problem. You just need to be patient, know when to attack, when not to attack. Obviously, Daredevil now is quite an annoying champion to go up against, because he can purify the debuffs, and that includes like parry stance. And yeah, then we have Invisible Woman, Massacre, Dr. Voodoo, and OG Daredevil alongside Miles Morales. This was, I think, pretty much another quite clear-cut kind of Ghost path. The main thing to play around here is the Destructive Feedback, but so long as you're not using a champion who kind of actively relies on parry heavies, again, this lane is kept on purpose relatively open, plus giving incentive for you to use your mutant champions. And as I said before, you can pretty much bring in whoever you want for the most part. Now we have Encroaching Stun, Hurt Locker, Power Axis 2, and Specialist. Now, Specialist is again a bit of a nothing node. The biggest problem to deal here with, quite obviously, is the Encroaching Stun. So from top of your head, the champions that can go stun immune would be Emma Frost, would be Nick Fury, but obviously will not want to use Nick Fury here against Omega Red. And then it's important to also note that Apocalypse also has a chance to go stun immune whilst he is striking the opponent. But in order to get that for the very first fight, you do want to bring in Cable Synergy. And for this lane, I did choose to go in with kind of like a mutant team of Apocalypse and Cable and Omega Red, and Apocalypse, Colossus and Omega Red, and Emma Frost to gain power quicker, even though Power Axis 2 definitely help you with that as well. And I actually ended up using Colossus for vast majority of it. Keep in mind that you will want somebody who is poison immune against the Man-Thing, and other than that you're pretty much set and good to go. But you will also want somebody who is bleed immune because of Titonia's Taunts on Venom, ideally. So again, very strong emphasis on the mutant teams over there, because Apocalypse can go bleed immune, which is very helpful. Then you have Colossus and Omega Reds and M Frost, which all can be bleed immune. So if anything, this is the lane where you want to focus on the mutant champions more. But overall, again, Encroaching Stun is kind of like a problem node, but Power Axis to make it easier for you to get your special attacks. You have Hurt Locker to contend to, where you will want to alternate in between level 1s and level 2s. But thanks to increased power gain, you mitigate the problem that it is Encroaching Stun. As a quick side note, and as a general rule for Encroaching Stun nodes, you often want to pick champions who have relatively long Special 1 and Special 2 animations, just because it extends that time that special attack covers, and it's easier to kind of like time your special attacks with the Encroaching Stun node if you should so happen to kind of like slightly mistime it. But yeah, still a very decent design lane in my opinion, where we have very annoying node, and I typically absolutely hate Encroaching Stun, but we're also given some extra additional help. Now next one is a very annoying node where we have Static Blast. Wherever the opponent uses special attack, you lose 50 to 100% of your power. And in addition, then we have Extinction Protocol, where opponents gain extra attack. And then there's Specialist 2, where again it's a bit of a nothing node because you don't typically get planned. Well, you don't typically plan to get hit. And Static Blast makes it a lot trickier to use a lot of different champions. And this was a perfect example where I personally preferred my 5-star Sig 200 Ghost over my 6-star rank 2 Sig 20 Ghost, because that was a huge difference whether I made it first to my special 2 before the opponents did make it to their like level 1s and drop them. Other than Ghost, which is a fantastic option, obviously you need to look at champions who fly to their special attacks extremely quickly. You could potentially use Cosmic Ghost Rider here. You could potentially use Quake here. You could potentially use Archangel. So ideally you focus on champions who either do not rely on special attacks at all, or on champions who have extra increased power gains like Hyperion, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Ghost, who blitz to the special attacks very quickly, because Static Blast does hinder your game plan quite a bit. And in addition to all of that, you need to go up against Guardian, who can block your special attacks. So you want your special attacks either to be unblockable, or you want to avoid using special attacks altogether. And then you also have Magneto, which is obviously also troublesome for Ghost, if that is the way you choose to go with. For me personally, again, combination of Ghost and Quake worked absolute wonders here. Didn't have too much to stress about. Now we can move on to the next path, which is arguably one of the most annoying lanes altogether, where you have Vivified, which increases opponents' defensive power gain by 200%, and they're immune to Power Steal, Power Burn, Power Drain. Then you have Power Suppression, which helps mitigate that for Science Champions, but you also have Power Alternator, and that just gets very tricky very quickly, and opponents also have, well, all special attacks are unblockable. So this was, for me personally, just a lane where I went in full-on Ghost once more, and I just ended up tanking majority of opponents' level 3s, because playing around 200% power gain, unavoidable power gain basically, when you cannot control it or drain it. You want champions who either don't give opponent power or give very limited amounts of that, or champions who can basically tank special attacks, especially considering all of the special attacks are unblockable. And then you have champions like Longshot and yeah, Heimdall, who's level 2, is very tricky. You have Tigra, and this is definitely quite annoying lane. So as it quite often is when something's very annoying, I look for kind of like my back is against the wall option. I look to knock down the wall, and for me it was, yeah, do not power control the opponents at all, just eat the level 3s. For fights where it would be tricky, for instance Heimdall and Longshot, neither of those champions I particularly want to let them to get to that 2 bars of power, because it could end up very dicey. I end up quaking them. Some options that could be very useful here potentially could be the taunt champions, because that's not power control, but you'd still maintain a decent pace. So I suspect that stacking against Spider-Man here could be quite useful, in addition to She-Hulk, especially because She-Hulk is Science Champion, and you have this power suppression node where you basically want to have opponents throw as many of their special attacks as you can. You inflict a debuff at them, and then you just kind of get to spam heavy attacks for a whole bunch up until the power alternator kicks in. So in order to make sure you don't die, you want to drop your level 1s out as well. So it's a very tricky, very annoying node combination there, to be honest. And even though Science Champions do get some sort of a boost here, it's still quite hard to manage. So you can use Human Torch, you can use some other champions. Basically all Science Champions debuff the opponent, and there will be a while in the fight where they have energy weight on, and you can just spam heavy attacks against the wall. But again, you do need to constantly keep that clock watching for power alternator, because they will gain your power, and then things can get dicey if they end up shooting off like an unblockable level 2 in case of Heimdall, so and so forth. So again, my best advice here was just ghost and eat level 3s, quake what you can't. I brought in She-Hulk as well in addition to all of that. And obviously there are other options, namely you would want to look at your science roster there. And let's take a look at the last path here, which is Special Delivery, Cosmic Avalanche, and Mixmaster. And the Mixmaster lane for me was a very simple: go to Corvus, get that first mission on Red Skull for evading, knock him out, get second mission. Then we have Black Panther, which is third mission. Toward the end we get fourth mission from Frost. So this is pretty much a perfect Corvus path for most part. But here really the only serious thing to work around is Mixmaster, keeping in mind that you have the Special Delivery node, which will force you to use special attack every 15 hits, which will mean that some champions will be unable to use their standard rotations. But most of evade counter champions will work absolutely fantastic here. If you have any slow champions, it's a brilliant way how to counter that evade. So once again, you can easily bring in your She-Hulks, you can bring in your Sorcerer Supremes, and just ignore the Mixmaster altogether. Ghost would do fantastic, because Ghost also pretty much can ignore Special Delivery node with her extra power gain, and you can shut down opponents' evades completely. So your standard MVPs, your standard heroes here in form of Corvus and Ghost, and your most frequent evade counters will work just about fine. Right, now we do need to talk about all of the bosses. And first we have this No-Hit Mercy, Chitonius Thorns, Cutting Wires, Foresight, Venom. And this fight basically just has that one rule. No-Hit Mercy is nothing serious to worry about. Just gives opponent some buffs, whatever. Chitonius Thorns is what you need to look out for, because that is a huge bleed damage, especially when coming from bosses, and Cutting Wires disables you from using robot champions. Foresight gives you a significant attack increase if you are relatively free and comfortable intercepting. But again, only thing here is basically don't use a robot and bring in a bleed immune champion. If you so happen to bring in a bleed immune mystic that can nullify Venom's buffs and benefit from them highly, that's even better. Or if you have an ability to nullify and make sure that he has no armor or buffs, before you strike him, because Chthonius taunts are only dangerous if opponent has an armor buff. If the defender has an armor buff, the attacker is inflicted with a bleed debuff causing 50% of the defender's attack over 5 seconds each time contact is made. And that also can be used to your benefit, because you can bring in Omega Red with Coagulate Mastery. As I mentioned before, one of the paths leading up here is very suitable for mutant champions, for example. And then you're going to have Deathfield active pretty much always. Or it's going to be a very easy way for Colossus, for instance, to gain a lot of armor buffs, so on and so forth. So you can use the Chthonius taunts to your advantage by triggering your immunities and bleeds. But for most part, just Venom. Bring in a bleed immune champion and you can knock him out. And then next boss, which is Green Goblin, is actually arguably one of the easier ones. So you have Redlining, which is one of the new nodes where you gain a significant power gain increase from 1 to 2 bars of power. But if you shoot too high up past 2 bars of power, you're going to get power drain to 0. So the goal here is to use a level 2 as soon as you hit it, and be careful that you do not go basically past 2 1/3 of your power, more or less. However, power reserve obviously halves the amount of power that's being used on special attacks. So once you get to your initial level 2, you're only going to use half of that power, which is going to mean you still remain at 1 bar of power, which is going to mean that redlining is kind of in effect all the time, and you get a significant benefit from that increased power gain. And then there's cramping. While under effects of a weakness debuff, 10% of the attacker's power is drained every second. But if you don't eat a level 1 from the Goblin, you're not gonna get that weakness on, so that node's for most part ignored. And yeah, I ended up using Corvus here for 1 run, and for 2nd run I think I just used Warlock, just so I don't have to deal or worry with that regeneration. And it's a relatively straightforward fight. Just bring in champion who enjoys spamming level 2s, who can take some block damage from Green Goblin's special ones, because his special ones are very annoying to deal with. And you know how to fight Green Goblin. It's a very, very simple, very straightforward fight. But arguably the more trickier boss of this quest is this Rhino. And I'm going to talk about Tantrum Node in a second, but he also has Bubble Shield, so you're not going to deal any damage with your regular attacks, you only deal damage with your special attacks and damage over time effects. Then you have Bubble Shield, which let him go unblockable every 10 hits. And remember that he has his own ability to go unblockable whenever he dashes in at you. And Matador is actually a node that's very enjoyable in this matchup. Basically, every time he uses special attack, you gain a bar of power, but you do not gain you do not gain power in any other way during this fight. But since opponents gain power quicker than you would normally, it can actually be very helpful for your own special spamming. Now, Tantrum Node is a node that can be a problem. When the defender is struck by a basic attack, they give a Tantrum charge. When the defender is knocked down, all Tantrum charges are removed, and each deals a burst of physical damage equal 10% of the defender's attack to the attacker. While the defender has a concussion, disorient, enervate, or taunt debuff, all Tantrum charges are removed without causing any damage. Defender cannot gain Tantrum charges, period. So these debuffs are a must here. You need to look at concussion, disorient, enervate, or taunt. Champions who have guaranteed access to them are the way to go, and luckily one of the most popular skill attackers, being Nick Fury, is a champion who has guaranteed access to disorient on his level 1s. So the game plan here is effectively quite simple with Nick Fury. Just drop your level 1s and that's it. You're not going to take any damage. It's going to be a very easy, straightforward fight. And other options to use here would be Night Rusher. He has guaranteed access to disorient on his level 1, which you can keep on refreshing infinitely, especially with that increased power gain here. Taskmaster actually is also absolutely fantastic option. because Taskmaster, you can exploit weakness and place concussions on opponent and completely disable the Tantrum. Underweight access is via Gwenpool and Spider-Gwen, but I don't suspect too many of you guys have it ranked up. And concussion, we have who are the best concussion champions. Mr. Sinister, you don't want to use that. Luke Cage, if you happen to have him ranked, can access concussion quite easily on level 2. And then we have Emma Frost, who has concussion. But still, ideally, I think you just kind of want to stick to Nick Fury, Stark Enhanced Spider-Man. He has guaranteed access to Taunt. And then there is the Night Rusher, the Taskmaster, and probably some more skill champions. But make sure that you have a champion that is highly ranked, that has a guaranteed access to these. You do not want to leave it to an RNG chance. You do not want one of these debuffs not to trigger on your like special attack or heavy attack, knock him down, and you're going to be pretty much instantly KO'd. So yeah, Nick Fury again is probably by far the best options personally who I used. I have seen some very cool stuff from Taskmaster, from Night Rusher, and I think Spider-Gwen I actually have seen a video as well. And that is it for this quest, and yeah, I'm not going to keep you guys any longer. I'm going to be back tomorrow discussing 713, and if you enjoy the video or find it helpful, please hit that sub button. See ya.